happy wax on Wednesdays. This is just a couple of really fun techniques in the cold wax again this week, and I'm working on Arches oil paper, and this is what it looks like. This is actually a pad, a 12 by 16 pad, and when I'm doing my little small pieces, I can either work larger on this whole pad, or I can break them down into 4 squares and work on them individually. And this is 3 that I'm working on right now that have been drying for a couple of days. So these have been drying for a little bit. They're not still completely 100% dry, but they have been drying for a couple of days, and that allows me the opportunity to do some fun things and some fun techniques, paint over. There's no fear of getting mud when I'm painting, so I'm free to just lay over the paint on these layers now and maybe expose some of the previous layers, or maybe I want to cover it up completely. It just depends. A lot of these pieces, just like my encaustic, I'm building layer upon layer upon layer, and some layers get completely covered up in the end, and some of them I like to reveal some light or some color through them. It just depends on how it goes when I'm painting. They're all very abstract. I've again taped them off so there's a nice even little margin when I go over and take the tape off. They'll be nice and clean, and you can mount these to panel after you're done, and you can also mat them and frame them under glass. You can add a last coat of clear wax over them for a finish as well. And a lot of times I like to mat the little small pieces, and sometimes I'm just doing them as a warm-up here on the studio before I work on my bigger pieces, but this size is just really fun. And somebody asked a question last week about the Arches oil paper, and you actually don't have to prep this with a gesso first. I'm like a priming type of girl, so I like to prime and prep everything, but it's not necessary to gesso this before you use it, according to Arches. I always prime my pieces, and these are all primed with encaustic gesso, and I have it in the studio, so I prime everything with 1 or 2 coats of that before I get started. And I have a paper palette sheet here that has a couple of colors. I have a Winsor & Newton Artist Sap Green, and I also have some Prussian Blue, and then some Winsor & Newton White. And I have my cold wax right here in the center, and it's ready to go. It's ready to start being mixed with the other. And so I'll just break a little piece off and set it the appropriate amount for what I want to do by each of the colors. Paper. And usually I would tape this paper down right over here to the left, but since I need to move it around and sort of show you on the camera, I didn't tape it down quite yet. So you don't tape this paper down, somehow it'll get a little bit annoying and pop up on you there. Now a lot of times I'll also use a gal kid, the Gamblin gal kid in with this, and I like to make it makes it a little bit shiny, and also helps the drying time, and it also helps it harden over time. And so that's one of the mediums I really like to use. So today I'm just going to use straight cold wax and oil paint. Okay, so this is kind of a fun stage to be at, because there are several different things that you can do with these pieces now. I can take my palette knife and I can scratch into that painting and really dig in and make some fun marks. I can also take all of the same tools that I use for my encaustic for the cold wax. So I've got some scrapers and a stylus that I can use, the same stylus that I use for encaustic paintings, and I can use that to make some fun, very fine lines into the paint. And I might not keep this, I might cover it completely over it, but it's fun to see what will happen. And then you know on future layers what can be done with these tools. So it's fun to play on those early layers and just see what will happen. On this thicker piece, I can use the clay tool to take it back. And this is fun when you have a lot of layers built up, because you can take it back down to a previous layer, just like encaustic. So it's fun to sort of scrape back in and see what's going on. And often creating some texture. If you're just scraping back in certain places, you can create some more texture. The drier the painting, the more texture that you're going to create. And now for the next layers, I can simply take my finger and work some in certain areas and really work it around those colors. I do like to use my fingers. I can also don't want that straight. This is just a piece of copy paper from the printer. Well, let's go like that. Use that as a mask. I've taken some white on just a brayer. And that gives me an instant horizon line with just a piece of torn paper. So it's kind of a really fun, quick technique when you're working abstractly, just to take some paper. You can also do actual shapes. I like to do them in maybe some stripes and strips and create different parts of my horizon, different parts of my horizon line. In fact, let's do that on this one. But this is just a really fun effect, and I'll probably play here with the rest of it when it dries just a little bit. But it's really a instant gratification type of technique. So I also like to play with lines in paper in different shapes. So by doing that sort of opposite, I can give quite a few little interesting things, and then I will take a color. Let's take, and I'm not even going to clean the brayer, I'm just going to leave that white on there and do a little blue as well. And just see what happens here. And I could tape the edges for a cleaner, much cleaner line with this brayer, but we're just sort of going quick. And there's no sense in wasting this good paint that's on this paper. So I'm going to take it on this third piece and just rub a little bit and see what happens there too. It's fun to work in a series and play with 3 or 4 pieces at once and just really play with what can happen with marks. I'm going to take the other paper and do the same thing, just sort of playing with what can happen here. So that's sort of fun as well. And I can take another piece here, still a little blue on there. I'm going to hold that down. Just making some fun marks with different sort of tools that don't have to be expensive. They can just be whatever you have around. And this time I'm going to take my catalyst blade, and I've masked off again. I've masked off here with just a piece of paper, and I'm just going to take the catalyst blade and add some white. Little blue got in there, and that's okay. A little bit of blending, or I can put some more white right over it and sort of blend it out. And again, another fun horizon line. And I'm really fond of this this first horizon line, so I'm going to use it here on the third piece. And again, I'm going to use my catalyst wedge, and I've made some of the sap green just a little bit lighter, and just again squeegee across it. It's really fun. And on this one I can actually scrape a little bit harder with my catalyst wedge and scrape back to that great texture that I added in the first layers, and really just let that show through and still have that wonderful texture, but now with my new green color. So all this great texture from those first layers is going to really show through in the end painting, unless I completely cover it up again. But I'm really enjoying this sort of texture right there in the horizon line of that dark blue. So I think I'm going to continue to scrape back and reveal that texture right through the end of the painting. And you never know, I could change it, but right now I'm just really enjoying it. And a lot of times I will work on several of these a day, and I'll go ahead and I tape them to the backs of really large, this is just cardboard from sheets of watercolor paper that I have. I usually, waste not, want not. I keep the backs of the pads as well and just save them, or boxes or anything like that. And that way they're really portable, and you can lift them and take them out and set them on a surface to dry somewhere, and bring another one in and continue to work on them. It really saves on space if you're pressed for space in your studio. It's cold wax, so it's not going to run. So you can stand them up vertically and stand them against the wall or what have you, and let them dry. And that way you can continue to work on several pieces. You can be, or more if you're working. You can be working on 4 or 8 or 12 pieces at a time. You got 4 on a board, and when you've got a layer down of that, and you need to let that layer dry for a bit, set it aside, stand it up, and bring another piece of this portable cardboard in to your workstation and go for it. So it's nice to keep them, these paper pieces, it's nice to keep them portable and mobile and not adhering them right to your table surface so you can't move them around when they need to dry for maybe a day or 2 or 3 days. You're going to want to move them off of your valuable work surface and off to dry somewhere. So my big tip of the day is portability when working on paper and cold wax. It really does need dry time. It's not like in caustic where it's almost instantaneous and you can, once it's cooled down a bit, you can start working on it and start another layer. It does need time to dry, not as long as oil paint with the cold wax mixed in, with the cold wax medium mixed in, but it still does need a little bit to set up so you're able to go ahead and dig back in and add more layers and keep that raised texture. If this was wet and I would have done that right layer over layer, I would never have been able to keep that texture. But since I waited a few days and let it dry, I can now keep that texture throughout the painting, right through the end if I want. So it's really important, if you want to keep your texture, to let it dry in between layers. So this is just a couple of fun tips and techniques for cold wax painting, and next week I will add another layer on the same three so you can see where they go and what happens to them. And I just put up on the website, I'm starting to fill my live workshops for the fall, and I just put a cold introduction to cold wax painting in live workshop in my studio in Cincinnati. So if you'd like to be a part of that workshop, I teach very small groups in my studio, so it can be a lot of one-on-one time, and that one-day workshop is September 8th, and I will be adding more to the website as we go through the summer. I'll be adding more fall workshops to the website. And also, if you are in the Cincinnati area, Cincinnati, Ohio area, I am having an opening this weekend at the Art Around the Park Gallery in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, and that's about 6 miles south of Cincinnati, and I would love to see you. Anybody from Wax on Wednesdays that would like to come and see, I would love to meet you in person. And that is on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Friday and Saturday, it's 5 to 10 p.m., and Sunday, it's 1 to 4. So if you're in the area, I would love to meet you and come out and see me at Art Around the Park in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. And that's right outside of, about 6 miles south of downtown Cincinnati. So I hope you enjoyed these quick techniques and tips, and we will take these one step further next Wednesday. And happy Wax on Wednesdays, everybody. Have fun.